The world outside was cloaked in a heavy mist, the kind that seemed to swallow the city whole. The streetlights glowed faintly, their pale yellow light barely cutting through the thick fog. Rain had been falling for hours, a soft, persistent drizzle that turned the pavement into a mirror of dull reflections. A chill hung in the air, wrapping itself around everything, seeping into bones, hearts, and minds. Amidst this cold, dreary backdrop, there was a figure, a dog. She sat alone on the curb, her body shivering from the dampness that soaked through her fur. A gust of wind blew across the empty street, causing the scraps of paper to flutter and dance along the gutter. But the dog didn't move. She had long since lost the strength to care about the things around her. Her fur, once a rich golden brown, was now matted and unkempt, its softness replaced by the stiff texture of neglect. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, were now clouded with a deep, quiet sadness. Her ribs, visible beneath the thin layer of fur, told a story of hunger and pain. She was skinny, gaunt, and weary, as though the weight of the world had settled on her small shoulders. For as long as anyone could remember, she had wandered the streets, abandoned by the people who were supposed to care for her. There were no kind faces here, no warm hands to stroke her fur, no loving voice to reassure her that everything would be all right. She was just another stray, another forgotten soul that had slipped through the cracks of the world. The city, with its endless noise and bustle, had long since stopped noticing her. People walked past her every day without even a glance, their eyes trained on their phones or lost in their own thoughts. No one cared about the lonely dog who sat in the rain, hoping for a kind word, a scrap of food, a touch of warmth. But there was something about her, something that made her different from the others. While the world moved on, indifferent to her suffering, there was a flicker of hope deep within her. It was small, fragile, but it was there. In her heart, buried beneath the layers of pain and fear, she still held on to the belief that maybe, just maybe, someone would come. Someone who would see her, not just as a stray, but as a soul deserving of love. The dog had no name, not a real one anyway. The people who passed her by didn't stop long enough to give her one. She had been abandoned too many times, forgotten too many times, to matter to anyone. Yet, in the quiet of her loneliness, she would often imagine what it would be like to have a name, something to call her own, something that would make her feel like she belonged. But in this city of glass and steel, of hurried footsteps and blaring horns, it seemed as though belonging was a luxury only for the fortunate. And she was not one of the fortunate. The wind picked up again, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and distant car exhaust. It chilled her further, sinking into her bones. She tucked her tail closer to her body, trying to shield herself from the cold. There was no shelter nearby. There were no warm beds waiting for her, no kind-hearted souls offering her safety. Just the relentless rain, the gray sky, and the deep ache in her heart. As she huddled there, the noise of the world faded away. In the silence, her thoughts wandered back to the life she had lost. She didn't remember much, only flashes of warmth, a soft voice, and the smell of food cooking. But all of that had faded, replaced by the harsh realities of the streets. She had learned the hard way that the world was not kind, that the people she had once trusted had abandoned her, left her to fend for herself. And yet, as she sat there in the rain, waiting for something that felt like it would never come, there was a spark, a quiet, stubborn flicker of hope that refused to die. It was the kind of hope that only the broken could understand. A hope that came from within, from a place deep inside where nothing could extinguish it, no matter how much pain or disappointment it had endured. Her name was not important, not yet anyway. It was not important to the people who passed by, nor to the world that had forgotten her. But it was important to her. It was a part of who she was, a part of the life she once had and the one she still dreamed of. A life where she wasn't just a stray, but a dog with a home. A dog with someone who cared. If you believe in the power of kindness, stay with me until the end of this story. Because this dog, the one who sat shivering in the rain, was about to become something she never thought possible. A symbol of hope, a survivor, and maybe, just maybe, the star of a story that would change everything. As the hours passed and the rain continued to fall, a distant sound reached her ears, a car slowing down, tires squealing slightly on the wet road. She raised her head, ears perked. The sound of an engine cut through the air, drawing closer. It was a sound she had heard before, countless times, only to have it fade away as quickly as it came. But this time, something was different. This time, the car didn't speed off. It stopped. For a moment, she remained frozen, unsure of what to do. She had learned long ago not to trust anyone, not to let herself believe in the possibility of rescue. But still, her heart beat a little faster, a little louder. And then, through the fog, a figure appeared. A woman, her silhouette barely visible in the mist. She stepped out of the car, her face illuminated by the headlights. She looked at the dog, her eyes soft with something the dog hadn't seen in a long time: compassion. For the first time in a long time, the dog felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just the hope she had clung to for so long. It was something stronger, something deeper. This moment, this fleeting moment, could be the beginning of everything. But would this woman see her? Would she take the time to look past the doubt, the scars, the sad eyes, and see the soul underneath? The dog took a tentative step forward, her paws sinking into the wet pavement, unsure of what would happen next. And then, the woman spoke, her voice gentle, as if she had known this moment would come. "Hey there, girl. You're not alone anymore." The rain had softened to a light drizzle by the time the woman, Sarah, knelt in front of the stray dog. Her heart raced as she cautiously extended her hand toward the trembling creature. The dog's big, brown eyes met hers, full of a mixture of fear, pain, and the smallest flicker of hope. She was hesitant, unsure if this woman could be trusted, yet there was something in Sarah's voice that felt different from all the others. Something kind, something genuine. "Hey there, girl," Sarah murmured, her voice soothing. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The stray dog, who had no name but would soon be called Rosie, tensed, her body stiff and ready to flee if necessary. But something in Sarah's demeanor calmed her, and for the first time in a long time, Rosie didn't feel the need to run. She inched closer, still wary, but the kind woman's voice continued to hum in the air like a gentle lullaby, coaxing her forward. There was an energy in the way Sarah moved, slow, deliberate, not a single hint of aggression or urgency. It felt different from the way people had approached her before. This wasn't a stranger trying to take advantage of her or cast her aside. No, this felt like a real chance. With a tentative step, Rosie lowered her head, sniffing Sarah's hand. It took a moment before she allowed herself to make contact, her cold, wet nose brushing against Sarah's fingers. Sarah smiled softly, her eyes crinkling at the edges. "You're okay now," she whispered. The words hung in the air like a promise, and for the first time in months, Rosie allowed herself to believe in the possibility that things could be different. The journey home was an experience in itself. Sarah had wrapped a blanket around Rosie to keep her warm as they drove, the headlights cutting through the foggy night. Rosie had never been inside a car before. She had never known the comfort of a soft seat or the warmth of a car heater. She curled up on the passenger seat, her body still trembling, not entirely trusting the new surroundings. The ride was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of Rosie's shifting, her breathing slow and uneven. Sarah glanced over at her occasionally, her heart aching at the sight of how fragile the dog seemed. It wasn't just the physical scars, Rose's spirit had been battered, too. "Almost home, girl," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with tenderness. "Just hang in there a little longer." When they finally arrived at Sarah's apartment, she parked the car in the driveway and stepped out, gently lifting Rosie into her arms. The dog felt light, fragile, as though she could break if Sarah wasn't careful enough. It was strange, how small Rosie seemed in her arms, and yet, Sarah knew the dog had been carrying such a heavy burden for so long. The apartment was warm, the faint smell of cinnamon and vanilla lingering in the air from a candle Sarah had lit earlier. She placed Rosie down on a soft rug, watching as the dog hesitated, sniffing the air, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. Rosie was nervous, unsure of where to go, what to do. "It's okay, sweet girl," Sarah murmured, kneeling beside her. "This is your home now. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The first few nights were hard. Rosie refused to sleep in the bed at first, instead choosing to curl up on the cold floor beside Sarah's bed, as if she was afraid of getting too comfortable, too safe. She would startle easily at the sound of a door opening or someone walking by. Every so often, Sarah would wake to find Rosie trembling, even in her sleep, the shadows of her past haunting her. But with every passing day, Rose's trust in Sarah grew. Slowly, the dog began to explore the apartment, sniffing at the couch, the kitchen, the plants on the windowsill. Rosie was a curious creature, but it was a cautious curiosity, a desire to learn the world again, without the threat of abandonment looming over her. Sarah continued to be patient. She would sit with Rosie on the floor, her hand resting gently on the dog's back, whispering words of comfort. At times, Rosie would nuzzle into Sarah's chest, seeking comfort. Other times, she would recoil, but Sarah never pushed her. She understood that trust couldn't be rushed, and she was willing to give Rosie all the time she needed. Weeks passed. The cold weather began to fade, and the flowers outside Sarah's apartment bloomed, signaling the arrival of spring. Rosie had started to become more comfortable in her new home. She no longer cowered when Sarah reached for her, and when Sarah called her name, Rosie would wag her tail and walk over, her once dull coat now glistening with health. It wasn't long before Sarah noticed something else. Rosie was becoming more playful. She would chase after toys Sarah tossed across the floor, her body growing stronger with each passing day. It was as if she had forgotten what it meant to be a dog, what it meant to play and enjoy life. One afternoon, as Sarah sat on the couch with her laptop, Rosie bounded over, her tail wagging wildly. The dog pawed at Sarah's lap, her big brown eyes filled with excitement. Okay, Sarah laughed, reaching down to scratch behind Rosie's ears. What do you want? Who? But Rosie wasn't interested in getting attention. She darted toward the door, barking excitedly, as if she had just discovered a new world beyond the apartment. Sarah raised an eyebrow, standing up slowly. She had been hesitant to let Rosie roam outside, afraid the world might be too much for her, but this felt like the right moment. Rosie had shown signs of confidence, and perhaps it was time to test how far she had come. With a gentle tug on her leash, Sarah opened the door, and for the first time since Rosie had been rescued, the dog stepped outside. She hesitated at first, sniffing the air, but then she walked forward, her body relaxed, her eyes bright. The world beyond was vast and unfamiliar, but Rosie no longer seemed afraid. There were no walls, no fences, no boundaries, only the open sky and the soft grass beneath her paws. She looked up at Sarah, her face lighting up with pure joy. Rosie had taken her first step into a world she had once feared. And in that moment, something shifted within Sarah too. She realized that Rosie was not just surviving, she was beginning to live. It was at this point that Sarah's life began to change in ways she hadn't expected. One afternoon, after taking Rosie for a walk in the park, she received an email from a local animal shelter. They were hosting an event to raise awareness for dog adoptions and were looking for success stories to feature. The idea was simple: bring in a dog that had been rescued and share their journey to inspire others. At first, Sarah was hesitant. Rosie had only just started to heal, and the idea of her being in the spotlight again felt overwhelming. But as she looked down at Rosie, her dog wagging her tail and looking up at her with those eyes full of love, Sarah knew this was a chance not just for Rosie, but for other dogs like her. I think you're ready, girl, Sarah said, kneeling down to Rosie. Let's show them what you've got. The event was a small one, held in a community center just a few blocks away. When Sarah arrived with Rosie, she was surprised by the number of people who showed up. Families, individuals, and even other animal rescue organizations were there, all with the same goal: to find homes for abandoned animals. At first, Rosie was shy. She clung to Sarah's side, hiding behind her legs whenever a stranger approached. But as the day went on, something remarkable happened. Rosie began to trust again. She allowed people to pet her, to scratch behind her ears. She even posed for photos, her tail wagging enthusiastically as children surrounded her, laughing and playing. By the end of the event, Rosie was the star. People were captivated by her transformation, by the story of how this little dog, once abandoned and alone, had found a new chance at life. Sarah could hardly believe it. The timid, broken dog she had brought home just weeks ago was now a symbol of hope, a beacon for all the others who had been cast aside. It was during this event that Rosie's journey took another unexpected turn. It had been months since Sarah first found Rosie, abandoned on the streets, cold and alone. Now, as Sarah watched Rosie run through the backyard of their home, her fur glistening under the warm sun, it was hard to believe how far they had come. The dog that once cowered in fear at the sight of a hand reaching out now bounded through the yard with uncontained joy, her tail wagging like a metronome, her eyes sparkling with a new sense of life. The transformation was nothing short of a miracle. Rosie had gone from a trembling stray on the verge of giving up to a dog with confidence and hope. But the change wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. Rosie had learned to trust again, something that had seemed impossible when Sarah first met her. And Sarah, too, had learned something from Rosie. She had learned that sometimes, saving another soul was the very thing that could save you. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. It wasn't just about rescuing Rosie, it was about the love and connection they shared. Rosie wasn't just a dog to Sarah. She was a part of her, a companion in the truest sense of the word. They had both been broken in different ways, but together, they had begun to heal. One warm afternoon, Sarah sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when an email popped up from the shelter. They were reaching out to her, asking if Rosie would be willing to participate in a national campaign about the importance of adopting rescue dogs. The campaign's goal was simple: to show the world that rescue dogs were capable of incredible transformations when given a chance. Sarah stared at the email for a long moment, unsure of what to do. The idea of putting Rosie in the spotlight again made her nervous. Rosie had come so far, and Sarah didn't want to do anything that would set her back. But as she looked over at Rosie, who was lying on the floor, happily chewing on a new toy, she realized that this wasn't just about Rosie's story anymore. This was about giving hope to all the dogs who had been left behind, to show people that with a little love, a lot of patience, and a second chance, incredible things could happen. "I think it's time, Rosie," Sarah said, smiling down at her dog. "It's your time to shine." The following weeks were filled with excitement and preparation. Rosie would be featured in a video for the campaign, along with other dogs who had been rescued and found their forever homes. It was a big step, and Sarah worked tirelessly to make sure that Rosie was ready. She knew that Rosie had overcome so much, but the idea of facing an audience, even a small one, was still something that made the dog nervous. The bright lights, the cameras, the crowd, those things were foreign to Rosie, and Sarah wanted to make sure she felt safe and secure. The day of the shoot arrived, and Sarah drove Rosie to the location, a beautiful dog-friendly park. The air was crisp, the sun warm, and the atmosphere buzzing with energy as volunteers and staff moved about, preparing for the shoot. There were other dogs there too, many of them shy and unsure, much like Rosie had been when she first arrived in Sarah's life. As they walked through the park, Rosie's nervousness became palpable. She clung to Sarah's side, her eyes darting from one person to the next, unsure of who to trust. But Sarah, who had learned the rhythm of Rosie's fear and had come to understand what she needed, bent down and whispered softly, "It's okay, Rosie. You're not alone. You've got this." And in that moment, Rosie did what she had never been able to do before. She took a step forward, trusting in Sarah, trusting in herself, and trusting in the possibility of the future. The shoot began, and as the cameras rolled, something magical happened. Rosie, once so shy and fearful, began to shine. She interacted with the crew, happily wagging her tail as people approached her. She was the star of the show, not just because she was the face of a campaign, but because she was a living testament to the power of love and second chances. Her transformation wasn't just about how she looked, but about who she had become, a confident, joyful dog who had found her place in the world. It was during the shoot that Sarah noticed something remarkable. As Rosie posed for photos, her eyes sparkled with the same light they had when she first stepped outside of Sarah's apartment months ago. That spark of hope was still there, only now it wasn't just a flicker. It was a flame that burned bright, lighting the way for others who had been lost in the dark. The video campaign was a resounding success. Rosie's story spread across social media, touching hearts everywhere. People who had once overlooked rescue dogs began to see them for what they truly were: resilient, loving, and capable of extraordinary transformations. Sarah was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support and love for Rosie. It was incredible to see how many people resonated with her story, how many people were inspired to adopt rescue dogs of their own. But for Sarah and Rosie, It wasn't about the fame or the attention. It was about the quiet moments at home, where Rosie curled up beside Sarah at night, her body warm and safe. It was about the walks they took together, the way Rosie now pranced through the park, her head held high, her steps confident. It was about the love they had found in each other, and the life they had built from the ashes of their pasts. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Rosie resting her head on Sarah's lap, Sarah thought back to the day she had found Rosie, huddled in the rain, a lonely figure in a world that had forgotten her. She thought about the long journey it had taken to get here, the moments of doubt, the setbacks, the small victories that had led them to this place. But most of all, she thought about the dog that had entered her life when she least expected it, the dog who had taught her what it meant to love unconditionally, to heal, and to never give up, no matter how difficult the journey seemed. "You did it, girl," Sarah whispered, scratching Rosie's ears. "You're home." Rosie looked up at Sarah, her brown eyes soft and filled with gratitude. There were no words, no grand gestures, just a simple connection that spoke volumes. In that moment, both of them knew the truth. They had found something more than a home. They had found a family. And as Sarah sat there, her hand gently stroking Rosie's fur, she felt the deepest sense of peace she had ever known. They had both come so far. And now, in each other's company, they were whole. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would always be challenges, obstacles to overcome. But together, they had already proven that love could heal, that second chances were worth fighting for, and that the greatest stories were the ones that emerged from the most unlikely places. And as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the room, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. For Rosie, for herself, and for every other dog who deserved a chance at a life full of love and happiness.